I'm Mrs. Schneider, and I am the biology teacher for grade 8. And you have my contact email here. You may also contact me on Edmodo. And I would like to run through what your child has done during this past 2 terms, and we are now in term 3, and what will lie ahead for the September exam assessment. The content that we covered during term 1 and during lockdown term 2, we started off at the beginning of the year with skills in scientific method. They started off with a research topic that they had to choose, because I wanted them to go through the whole research process. How do you draw a diagram for biology? What is the IEB criteria for labeling? What are the criteria for graphs and tables for IEB? Remember, we are preparing your child for his IEB exam in grade 12 if they are going to still be here. Then practical designs. How do you design an experiment? What will your aim and hypothesis be? And all of these to be able to do a research project. The next chapter was photosynthesis. They need to know how to do an equation. What are the raw materials? What are the adaptations for the process regarding the plant, the leaf itself, to be able to have the process of photosynthesis taking place. Then there are certain factors in the environment that will affect the rate of photosynthesis. Along with photosynthesis, we covered a section regarding respiration, that is cellular respiration inside of each cell. That will be an animal or plant cell. We also had a table where we compared respiration and photosynthesis and how they differ. Then we moved on to ecology. We looked at the biotic, which is the living, and also the abiotic, which is the non-living elements, which are all part of the ecosystem. We looked at food webs, food chains, and how the feeding relationships exist between different organisms. We looked at the ecological pyramid during lockdown. I will be going through this section during August when we have revision. We also looked at energy flow in the ecological pyramid. There was one short chapter regarding symbiosis. Symbiosis is something that exists between different organisms. There's a relationship between the organisms. You have plant and plant and animal relationships. Some of them are bad, like parasitism. Some of them are, they have no effect, which is commensalism. And then you have something that animals or plants have a relationship where they are both getting something out of that relationship, which we call mutualism. They both benefit. Then we moved on to balance in ecosystem, where we are looking at disruptions and the resources that we are disrupting in our environment. And we've specifically focused on pollution regarding human factors. During term 3 and 4, we started off with dependence of plants and animals on soil. What are the factors? Why do plants and animals need soil? Why must soil be available, whether it's an indirect or a direct dependence? We will also be moving back to ecology, because now we are focusing on soil specific. How is soil created? There are certain physical and chemical factors that also help to create soil. And then we will do a practical. I will do the practical in class. I will also make a video tape of what we've done. There is another video that those pupils that are still at home, that they can watch. They will not miss out on anything, but they need to do the worksheet based on the practical. We will also have microorganisms, which is still part of the September exam. We will focus only on the useful microorganisms, bacteria. Yes, bacteria are also harmful to us, but we will, for now, we will only look at the usefulness of bacteria, but we will also need to have a look at harmful microorganisms, specifically the virus, and yes, I will talk about COVID. And then we will look at kingdoms, animal and plant kingdoms. We will look at the cell. We need to look at the cell because this is something that we are going to go right through the IAB career here in biology and eventually life sciences if they continue with the subject. We will also look at the relationships and adaptations of animals, what their mouth parts look like. So what kind of food will they be able to utilize to get their nutrients? And lastly, adaptations of plants. We have our xerophytes and our hydrophytes, and what are the differences? The mark breakdown and weightings for term 1 and then obviously term 2 with lockdown. We had a term test in the first term, and the term test 2 was basically the assessment they wrote during lockdown. That counted 60% for their formal mark. In the first term, we had a scientific method worksheet in class. We had a data worksheet, we had a research worksheet, the rolling of the tongue, and that was collated for the informal mark for term 1 and 2. Move on to the breakdown of marks and weightings for term 3. The September exam assessment will be the entire 60% for their formal mark. I will use 3 assessments from the term 2 lockdown time frame, where we did a quiz on pollution. They did a worksheet on pollution on Edmodo, and then the research project that we started in January in the first term, many of them submitted that on Edmodo, or they emailed it to me. I will mark that and use that for a term 3 mark. Then for term 3, we will do a quiz on Edmodo for microorganisms, and then shortly we will do the soil practical. They don't need to do the practical themselves, but it will be observation of the practical that I will do, or the video, and they will simply then apply the data that is created by the practical on their worksheet. Grade 8 will only write 1 paper. It's an hour and a half for 100 marks, and the scope will be scientific method. So they must be able to draw something and label it to the criteria for IAB. They must be able to draw a graph if I give them graph paper, and they must be able to set up a table from data that I provide them. Obviously, I will not be able to ask all 3, but they must be able to apply any one of those. Then photosynthesis and respiration, they must be able to compare the 2 processes, but they must also know the basic definition and rates and factors regarding photosynthesis and respiration. For ecology, they need to know all the work regarding the living and the non-living, the soil factors, the soil practical, the ecological flow, the ecological pyramid, section on symbiosis, the different types of relationships in symbiosis, microorganisms, we are doing the bacteria and the virus, and then the balance and disruption in the ecosystem, the different types of pollution, and then the human impact on the environment.